Right then. Good morning, people. And today, in the ever-going group of talks, we have a very interesting talk for you today. This is by Lee Turner, and I'm told Steve Camp is also going to be joining Lee on this. And it is for the Quaker African Interest Group and its work. And also news of reparations, redressing equalities. Over to you, Lee.
Thank you very much, Ray. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, excellent. And thank you, Patsy, for setting this up. It seems like ages ago when you first approached me. But Steve and I are delighted to be with you today. So two of us, we're both members of the Quaker Africa Interest Group, and each of us work in a different country on projects that we'll go on to describe. So what we thought we might do, if that's okay with you, is I'll talk briefly about what Quaker Africa Interest Group does, then hand over to Steve to talk about Forward Africa and the work that they do in Rwanda, and then come back to me to talk about the work that Friends of Lekweni used to do and Peaceworks Zimbabwe now does in Zimbabwe. What we'd like to do, though, is leave plenty of time for your questions and discussion. It's always useful before one starts this kind of talk just to check whether anybody here has spent half or the whole of their working lives in a country in Africa or has particular connections. Okay. So Angela, are you?
I lived and worked for 3 years in Botswana. And that was, with the Ministry of Education, because I'm a teacher basically. And
Right.
then I was also married to a Senegalese man, so I've spent quite a bit of time visiting, particularly Casamance, the very traditional part of Senegal, and I was very, very honoured to spend time there because they don't like visitors very much. So very different countries. I mean, that's what strikes me about when people say Africa. It's so different, so different, so wonderful, so wonderful.
Huge continent with so many different countries and literally thousands of languages. I'm going to hopefully share my screen now. Let's see whether this works.
Yeah.
Let me get on to play if I can. Okay. Well, Quaker Africa Interest Group. What do we do? Well, we work with friends in Africa, basically. Quakers in Africa, and here's a group of young Quakers from Bulawayo meeting who are very active, and we'll meet one of them later on in this short presentation. So we're a network and also a Quaker recognised body, which I think is quite important. That Quake has gone through the approach that sufferings suggests for groups. And we are what it says on the tin. We're a network. We facilitate discussions with Quakers in Africa and those interested in or already working in Africa, and different countries in Africa. And obviously we work closely with Friends World Committee for consultation. And we share our initiatives and our experience, hugely important. And we aim to discuss cross-cutting themes. And we believe that we have stories and experience to share, which may be particularly helpful as we move on to issues like reparations, redressing inequities. So the kind of areas of work that members of the network are engaged in are education, first and foremost, education, peace building, health work, agriculture, mainly small scale, but not exclusively, issues around sustainability, and then seeing if we can provide resources that are badly needed there, which we may have better access to. But we are quite a varied group. And our projects and charities span East, West, and Southern Africa. And so you'll see the list of countries there. Doesn't stretch as far as Senegal, but it is a wide range of fairly different countries. Perhaps most of the work is being done around the Great Lakes, and then I guess there are two kind of foci of attention. So Gambia kind of off to the side a bit. I have to say, before I went to Zimbabwe the first time, I had to look up where it was on the map. I expect you're better educated geographically than I am, but I feel that sometimes we do talk about Africa as one entity, and it certainly isn't. Well, I'll leave it there. So let me just talk briefly about reparations, or actually, as Quaker Africa Interest Group prefers to think about it, redressing inequities. And as you know, Britain Yearly Meeting spent considerable amount of time and energy in 2022 discussing it, and there was a strong minute building on the anti-racism commitment of earlier years. I think that as a society, we found it pretty hard to grapple with what we mean by reparations, and that people in various meetings are in very different places on it. Quaker Africa Interest Group is actually very clearly in a particular place on this. We believe in right sharing. We focus on partnership work, on being on the ground, listening and working alongside, providing practical support in the areas that I've outlined. And I think reparations is quite a conflicted term, and perhaps we don't necessarily want to get into that. But redressing inequities, thinking about right sharing, perhaps gives a flavour of where we come from, doing practical work to repair, help now on the ground, what we can do. So I'm going to hand over to Steve now. I will stop sharing if I can. Oh, sorry, my cursor isn't moving. There we go. Right, I apologise. I can see where it says stop share. Steve, can you go over to the top of me on this? Share your screen over the top. Can you hear me, Steve? Excellent.
Yeah, okay. Have you got a different slide in front of you now?
Yeah.
Well, good morning, friends. It was quite encouraging, the start to this Zoom, where we had a few sort of technical learning issues. And that's a little bit like being involved in projects and charities in Rwanda. You think you know what you're doing, and oops, it doesn't quite always work out according to plan.
And at the moment, Steve, we've got your slide sorter rather than just the main slide. Doesn't matter.
Okay, let's see if I can
Start the show.
is that better?
That's it.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, thank you.
There's a good example of of the case I was making.
Learning on the job, I think it's called.
Learning on the job, and it's been very much a journey. I've worked in Rwanda for a year as a volunteer, and I've also worked as a paid person in Liberia, working for a small American outfit which was involved with community health workers. I was the logistics guy, attempting to work with the Ministry of Health in getting their logistics to support not just field-based health centres, but people, mainly women, who are the actual community health workers, 2 or 3 hours walk away from the nearest health centre. So, but Rwanda, for me, I started this charity, which is a Quaker recognised body, not because so much inequalities between the West or the UK and Rwanda, but because of the inequalities within Rwanda, where, guess what, those who have the money get to give their kids a good education. Those who have nothing really struggle to give their kids any education whatsoever. So what we do is we work with teenagers or young people. When I started fundraising, I was told many, many times that nobody gives to teenagers, everybody gives to youngsters, i.e. primary schools. But the state in Rwanda does do state education, and it doesn't do it particularly well, but at primary school level, it does do it. At secondary school level, it really falls away, and there's a lot of dropouts, mainly with young girls, but sometimes with blokes as well. So this picture here is obviously during COVID times, is our first peace and conflict resolution workshop, where we got all of our students together, and there you can see they're sort of doing some sort of exercise. Because the resources are so poor. I mean, you go into a typical Rwandan school, and you're chatting away to the head and what have you, and you ask if you can walk around the classroom, and they're very pleased to show you around. You ask you to go into the library, and you don't tend to see any books, and you ask where are the books, and they say, oh, they're all locked up. They're locked up in the cupboard. So books are really, and even pens and pencils in pretty short supply. If can you see the girl fourth from the left? I don't. Can you see her?
Yeah.
She's called Peru, and this picture, blimey, I guess it was taken about 3 years ago. She is now. She's always had a rather I don't know what the word is. A sort of a sad, a troubled face. And she's always like that. I mean, she does do a smile, but it's pretty rare. She is now just been accepted into the East African Christian College to study nursing, and the smile on her face when she was accepted into that was absolutely massive. She's pretty well a transformed person. Martin on the left, he's always grinning. He was his parents had to leave Rwanda before the 1994 genocide with an earlier ethnic sort of problems. ended up in Tanzania. His father died. When the Tanzanians kicked out all the refugees, he came back, and eventually he was sort of the Quakers got hold of him, and we funded him through his last 3 years of senior school, and he's now studying to be a lawyer. He wants to be a human rights lawyer. So what we get up to, it's basically secondary school education for disadvantaged, for poor Rwandan teenagers, and they join our sort of our program through the Quakers. The Quakers, we asked the Quakers to give us some names, and off we go, and we then support them. We hold peace, conflict resolution workshops, and they've proved a great success. The kids love coming, they're given decent food, decent accommodation. And remember, most Rwandan youngsters don't get to eat meat. When they do, it tends to be chicken or sort of a beef, a part of a cow, but it's pretty rare. So they do love coming to the workshops, and for them, because they're in different parts of Rwanda, they go to different schools. It's nice for them to get together as a group of youngsters. And then for the last 2 years, we've had this mentorship program, and Roots to the Future. I'll mention that a bit later as well. So there we go. Just the 3 programs. And I think the quotes are quite useful. I learned, this is a peace and conflict resolution one. I learned much about life, positive values, conflict solving, and now I'm sharing what I learned with my friends. That's Cynthia. When we do fundraising, they love to understand the models and how it works and who you're helping and what your interventions are. So that's our sort of model there. This is Daniel. Daniel was recommended to us by the Woodbridge Turning the Tide set up in the Great Lakes, East African area, and he was one of their main training facilitators for Alternatives to Peace, and we were so lucky because we asked him to lead on our first workshop, and he did. It was great. He's now become a trustee of our charity, and that's all. I mentioned the journey earlier on. It's you have a plan. I mean, my background is business and logistics, so I'm fairly sort of A, B, C, D sort of person. It doesn't really work. So we had a plan, and we've changed it a good few times. And with Daniel now on board, it's about listening. We're able to better hear the messages coming from those we're trying to help. And it's totally changed what we do now. The processes are different. The sort of help we provide is different. The insights we have are different. And the outcomes are so much stronger, so much better. Yeah. Jahari's window, is that a concept? I can see David. Yeah, David's giving me it's really interesting. I did this on a management training course a couple of decades ago. The window's about what you know about yourself, what you know about others, what others know about you, and what others know about you that you don't know about yourself. It's great fun. The tree of trust, the tree of mistrust, these are all sort of alternatives to violence stuff. And the youngsters really buy into it. Oh, there we go. That's in Kiliwandan, so it won't make much sense, but it's about the roots. If you have trust embedded into your circumstances, your outcomes tend to be positive. And conversely, there's a tree of mistrust where if you're poor, disadvantaged, don't know where your next meal's coming from, illness, bullying by the authorities, you've got a lot of mistrust, and of course your outcomes tend to look pretty ugly. And these are all things sort of explored and developed by Daniel and his co-presenters. There we go, the dreaded T-shirt. A certificate of attendance after one of the workshops. Not quite certain why that's in there, but that was during COVID, where, because all the schools closed, everybody went home. The only problem was that the mums or the guardians all lost their jobs because they were mainly casual workers. What you work today, you put on the table tomorrow. Well, nobody could go outside. I mean, Rwanda was very, very strict, and it's not a sort of country or regime where you mess around. If the authorities say you stay inside, that's what you get to do. So everybody lost their work, and nobody had, well, of our lot, nobody had a way to feed themselves. So we sent across some money, and our Quaker volunteers got out there, and it is quite interesting because they're so advanced in terms of mobile money. They sort of upload money onto their phone. They can then send that to somebody deep in the countryside, who can then use that to buy groceries at the local grocery store. So that worked pretty well. Oh, here's Stephen working in the garden with his mum, and then working on his books during COVID. It was pretty messy. I mean, the government had teaching through radio, which is an old technique in many African countries, but it doesn't really work. The fortunate kids had teaching through iPad, and it's similar to what we had in the UK. If you had an iPad and a nice quiet bedroom where you could work, it was great. If you didn't have an iPad or a tablet, and you certainly didn't have any data and limited electricity, it just didn't happen. Yeah, just this was a poster at one of these schools where we were, one of our kids was attending. She was doing tourism and hospitality. And it's just a reminder that TVET, training and technical and vocational education and training is really a key player, because you want to get the sort of skills which enable you to get a job. So here's somebody training to be a nurse and a building and what have you. And what we've found is that, this aspiration of university to study whatever, it doesn't always work. Often much better to learn hairdressing or construction or whatever. Yeah, I mentioned the mentorship program. This was started by Josiers and Sandrine, two young Rwandan Quaker women, who set it up as a social enterprise. And we've partnered with them last year to put through 5 students, and this year 8 students. And it's great. This is after senior sits, after school. They attend 6 Saturdays, 6 consecutive Saturdays, and learn about CV writing, applications to universities, applications for internships, volunteering, and basically how to do. Because if you come from a poor family and you look around at, your mum or your neighbours, there's not much in the way of role models. In fact, there sort of tends to be nothing. So Josiers and Sandrine's initiative is great, and it helps the students to get to grips with things. And here they are, but we managed to get hold of some computers, some refurbished computers, and there they are, sort of working away. Right, with a bit of luck, Can you hear the music?
No, not hearing music.
No music. Let me try again.
There's sometimes a button on the share screen that says optimize. When you click share screen, it says optimize sound for something.
Right. Let me try that. Thanks for the tip.
Just a
I
little,
can't even find the sharing bit now.
yeah,
Seems to
top of the
have
screen is where you stop sharing.
got. Oh, here we go. Screen sharing. I've got screen sharing at the top.
Yeah, well, the button, you would need to stop screen sharing and then go back into screen sharing. And as you're going into screen sharing, there's a little button that says optimize the sound. Maybe.
Okay, so I'm going to do that little arrow on the screen sharing. One multiple.
If it doesn't work, I think we ought to move on, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But
I'll show you the video. It's only 2 minutes. I apologize. It's lovely singing.
Yeah, at the bottom it says share sound and optimize for video clip.
Can you see that? Can you? I can't.
In the sharing window, when you're selecting, in the window where you select the window you're sharing, at the bottom, certainly on a Macintosh, there are two little boxes to click. One saying share sound and the other says optimize for video clip. And then it works. If you like.
Right, okay. I've heard Lee give me the message to. I'm just going to quickly try this. If it doesn't work, I apologize.
Are you there still?
Steve, I think we need to let it go, unfortunately. Patsy, shall I move on? Steve, at the risk of you being cross with me after this, I'm going to move on. If you suddenly discover how to do it, then cut in, okay? Are you hearing me?
I'm not sure Steve can hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Right. I'm now going to try and come out.
Okay.
Can you take over from there, Lee?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misread you. I'm very grateful to Steve for raising some of the actually core issues through the illustrations he's given about working in partnership. I mean, Daniel, whom we saw the picture of, the tutor and the leader from the Great Lakes, is such an amazing, resourceful a person who anybody would want Daniel on their team for almost anything. And hearing the messages is truly important. And I would say that that through the work that I've been involved in Zimbabwe, we've also gone through that shift. In Quake, we're now talking about our work as project work rather than charities. Because somehow charities has this kind of we giveth unto approach, which is which is not, I think, what we're about at all. So Africans leading and us listening and trying to balance the challenges that then sometimes brings up. So, for example, we have a different regulatory framework with the Charity Commission and different hoops to jump through. So I think Steve would agree, it keeps us on our toes. But trust is absolutely important, and trust can only be built up long term. Steve described his work in Rwanda and Liberia. I've been going in and out of Zimbabwe since 2007. And it is by being alongside people there, being in the back of the trucks, not having lunch or supper when one might have expected to, seeing potholed roads and long journeys and people not there when you hoped they would be, and then suddenly an absolutely astonishing experience happens. I'm glad Steve also mentioned how COVID helped us to step up. That exactly the same happened in Zimbabwe. People could not go out and earn their living, which is often on the street in the grey economy. And it was absolutely critical for us to be helping to get money out for food aid and other things. And many people have said to me, we thought the world had forgotten us. Lots of people come and see us or get in contact. The Quakers stay alongside. And I think that is one of the hallmarks of Quaker work, faithfulness. And the work in Zimbabwe has been built on decades of work that I haven't necessarily been involved in Southern Africa, and the work of the Hlekweni Training Centre, once again on those technical and vocational education activities. Hlekweni had to close in 2014, presented a bit of a challenge to a charity called Friends of Hlekweni, but we reoriented towards helping primary schools and peace building work. We decided to close the charity as trustees at the end of last year. Not an easy thing to do, but actually I think Quaker Charities projects need to face that as the demographic of the society and changing circumstances give us different realities. It's better to close in good shape rather than to fizzle out. So just picking up on other points, when I go into a classroom, I will ask the teachers, has every child got a pencil? And I mean, obviously I don't lead off on that, but it's one of the things I want to know. It is wonderful to be able to provide a secondary student with a refurbished laptop, but pencils are the basis. Rubbers, little rulers, scientific calculators as prizes for students. So providing resources into the schools. And since Friends of Hlekweni closed, there have been 2 activities in Zimbabwe which have continued. One is about getting resources out there, so resources that are needed. And so apart from the things that I've shown you, we've teamed up with a group that provides these little knitted woolies and hats for young kids and teddies. Now this may seem kind of a drop in the ocean and a bit cutesy, but actually, if you're a child and this is your only toy, it's valued. And the people who knit these knit them with love, and I'm always very happy to receive them. So resources are still going out there. We've got a link up with Tools with a Mission to try and get agricultural kits out so that schools can and others can be growing more of their own food. They know how to do this. It's just that the kit they've got is often old. Zimbabwe is in a terrible state. Inflation of 175%.
It is.
the elections that finished recently were awful. However, Peacework Zimbabwe is continuing, and it arose from the work at Lekweni and the work that was sponsored by Friends of Lekweni. And at the risk of seeing, no, I don't think I'm going to even try and do this. Oh, no, don't try and do that either. Oh, sorry, what have you got on your, have you still got me on your screen?
Yes.
But nothing else, you haven't got anything, I don't know what's going on with my shares.
No.
Okay, okay, I'm not going to go into the pictures then. The Peace Alternatives to Violence Project Zimbabwe is a Zimbabwean-based organisation, partly Quakers and partly others. And they asked us if we could provide any support. We know what the cost of an AVP course is. It's around $900. We know that it provides a toolkit for people to use to reduce violence, whether that's bullying in the playground or much nastier violence in the community. And these things work. So we're able to do that. And off the back of that, and work done earlier in Zim, peace clubs in schools. And one of the things that I think I'm most proud of having been able to be involved in is the development of a peace manual, which is a Zimbabwean contextualized. It's been written by Zimbabweans. For use in secondary schools and also primary schools. And it is astonishing how much this is valued. We might think that the T-shirts and the cup of squash and the sandwich that the children in peace clubs get or the participants in AVP get are nice to have. Actually, they're really important. There, a sense of identity of as well as being respected, if you like, for the time and effort that individuals are putting in. Why would you come to a course when you're struggling to put food into your children's mouths? Because they believe in it. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say, and I'm sorry I haven't shown my the end of my pictures. But Patsy, shall we open it up? Sorry, Patsy and Ray, or shall we open it up for questions and discussion?
Yes, okay. That's absolutely right.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. Yes, please. Yep.
Patty.
Sorry I joined you late. Other things happen, as you know. Some basic questions so that I didn't fully understand. As soon as I arrived, the phrase alternatives to peace were mentioned. And I thought, hang on a minute, isn't it alternatives to violence? I thought it was just a typo, as it were. Just before Daniel was mentioned, before that picture. So I'm right, it's alternative to violence, but is it AVP or B, a Alternative for Violence project?
That's right. It's a worldwide project which was started actually in the US with prison populations, but has spread very widely across the world. Different variations. People may know about Quaker Peace and Social Witnesses support for the Great Lakes Initiative and healing and reconciliation there. Same principles.
Thank you, says Kat.
On the subject of what to do, when you're given...
West on Studland Road towards Earl Road.
Sorry?
It's my phone. I'm just turning it off. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. When you are when a project is suggested to you for doing of, you know, who decides what you're going to do, what project you're going to go to? You know, who is it kind of, is it consensus, or is it someone says, can you do this, or how does how does that work?
Should I try?
And I'm going to turn over to you, Steve, in a moment to answer for Forward Africa. But I would say there are different models with different projects involved in Quaker Africa Interest Group. How does it work with Forward Africa, Steve?
It's a good question, Ray, because money is tight, and you might have a wish to do all sorts of things, and there's no way that's going to happen. So you've got to prioritize. And what in our early days, the UK trustees prioritised. We've now moved somewhat to getting input, because we partner with the Quakers in Rwanda. We have a partnership agreement with them, and it's been quite interesting because we've been keen to get them to be more involved in decision making, and they have in fact been a bit reluctant initially, but you know, we're now getting there. So they will ask what they call their leadership team. So that's the clerk to the annual to the yearly meeting, and other members. I mean, in Rwanda they love having a big team. There's about 10 of them with all sorts of different titles. So they are involved in trying to decide what they think is most important. So do you put more money into secondary school education, or more money into mentorship, or into peace and conflict resolution? And they sort of have a major say in that. But legally, the trustees, whether they're based in UK or in Rwanda itself, they are responsible for the funds they have within that trust. So it is technically the trustees that decide, but they can encourage input from all sorts of folk, and that's what we try to do.
And Steve, would you say that going out and being on the ground there is important? It's, I mean, my experience is that you know, I could sit in my study in Milton Keynes and think that X, Y, and Z would be an excellent idea, but actually being in Zimbabwe, as I was in January, February this year, changed, and just observing, listening, talking, it just changes one's perspective. I would say broadly that most of the charities and projects have aims, and many have memoranda of understanding or letters of understanding with partners, and that's really useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, to answer your question again, Ray, we had a Zoom yesterday when we were talking about supporting some of the students who left 2 years ago, who are now being successful in getting university places. Now we've supported one young woman through a nursing degree, but it's hellishly expensive. But with this mentorship program, they've managed to get people with scholarships and the like. The problem with a scholarship or a government loan, it pays for your fees, it doesn't pay for much more. So there was a lot of requests coming through from Annette and Joyce for additional money to pay for things. We had a really interesting debate about, do we give it to them? Do we not give it to others? Do we give everybody a little bit, a small amount? Or do we create a discretionary fund, which the trustees will send across, and then they decide who gets it? And that is still, it's still in debate.
That is sign language for problem. Yeah.
Yes, and you have the kind of the whole idea of I mean, roll back a bit from that. I have a friend called Brenda who many years ago worked as a teacher in what was then Rhodesia. She worked for one of the church schools there, and she used to say that family is important very much. You know, that family is the main thing for them. And if some family could, you know, increase their standing, you know, it helped the whole family type of thing, you know, in that sense. But one of the things she did say, which I remember very powerfully, was I was sitting round their house just when Rhodesia changed to Zimbabwe, and the whole of the ministry team were sitting down, you know, or let us sit down and so. And she looked at the telly and she said, I taught him and I taught her and I taught him. She knew most of the cabinet that she taught, you know, as part of that ongoing thing. You know, is this something which is happening in your views now? Are those that you know gaining better things within the society? Within the society, I meant the wider societies that they are in now.
That's a good question. How much is our work training or helping with the leaders for the future in the different countries? I'm not sure much of the work that I've been involved in Zimbabwe would be in that category. Perhaps a secondary bursary scheme for gifted but needy students, and I think it's quite an interesting question. There is a charity which is a non-Quaker charity which really does go for gifted but needy students who have the potential for real leadership positions, and they pour huge amount of money into them, send them to the posh private schools, you know, blazers and that kind of thing. Would one want to wish that on any youngster for a start? I think the work that we do is, and I'm talking about work in Zimbabwe that I've been involved in, is at a much more more community-based level. And I mean, there's something inherently sort of Quaker about that, I think, which is seeing that of God and the potential in everyone. But it is interesting in terms of payoff, so to speak. And that raises a whole set of other questions about how do we know whether our work is making a difference? Well, clearly it is if people aren't starving. Clearly it is if somebody achieves O levels or A levels, still call them O levels in Zim. And Steve has talked about Peruth and her achievement, and I could talk about Skue, who is about to go on to medical school, whom I first met as an 11-year-old when her father had just died, and her family was suddenly penniless, and the head teacher of the primary school that we worked with very cleverly pulled me and said, I'd like you to meet someone, a family, Lee. The story was told. The weeping widow, the child whose future had been blighted. And Marco turned to me and said, can you help, Lee? And And of course, the answer to that, I think, has to be yes, especially as that child was extremely gifted. And she has done really well. And she's got a first-class honours degree and is about to, with actually help from a particularly generous Quaker donor, is about to go on to medical school. I don't know, one life at a time, one sparrow at a time. I don't know.
But you have to, as you've said, just a minute, if I may paraphrase you in a certain sense, you need strong grassroots to grow an economy. That is where you get it coming from. You can't just have amazing people that you pull out of a hat occasionally. There has to be that kind of teaching at a grassroots level to be able to go to the next step. I would personally say.
Can I just interject something quite different? I lived and worked in Botswana for 3 years. I came back in 2000. At the time, when I wanted to buy wonderful, imaginative gifts for my family, I went to Bulawayo. I don't know whether you can see it. Oh, no, you can't see it. I've just got one of the imaginative junk sculptures that I bought and brought back. The Zimbabwean people are so creative. Their country was destroyed by someone called Rhodes, and white people after that sometimes did their best to steal more. So I have quite a different perspective. I think my boss, Spencer Tizora, in Toronto College of Education, was a Zimbabwean. And his attitude, we used to discuss politics a lot because we were both interested. He used to say, the trouble with white people is they think they have all the answers. What we need is money and resources. And basically, although he never used this language, but I'm going to, and whites to bugger off, because they are the destroyers, the colonials, and they've done immense harm. So I just want to give you very gently a slightly different perspective. Get rid of your white heads, please.
Can I go next?
Certainly.
Could we hear a bit more about reparations? Because I think you only mentioned them in passing, didn't you? Or was I not paying attention?
Yeah, I spoke at the beginning about it, and that was, people here have seen the minute from the 2022 yearly meeting. I did send Patsy the Quaker Africa Interest Group's statement on redressing inequities, which outlines the approach of trying to do practical things on the ground in partnership, listening. Right. And I would agree with Angela. Money is truly important. Truly important. I would perhaps not be quite as strong on white people not turning up, because I think the friendships and the new relationships are absolutely key. But the relation, it's a difficult area to negotiate. In terms of how Britain Yearly Meeting is taking forward reparations, I would say it's slow, and that's partly, I think, because people find it a very hard concept to grapple with, and there are some who wish to go into the mechanics of it, and then, in my view, rapidly find that it's almost impossible to compute what benefits, say, individual meetings or individual families or whatever, or individual institutions have accrued. But that is a line that some people are going down. Britain Yearly Meeting has set up now a small reparations committee, which is getting underway. And I'm glad to say that Anne Floyd from Jordan's meeting, who's co-clerk of the Quaker Africa Interest Group, is on that as part of her work on QPSW Central Committee. I think trustees have in principle, BYM trustees have in principle agreed that money could be put aside, but we're a long way from thinking about as a society where that money might be directed. My own view is that the more discussion there is about this, the better. And you can probably hear that Quaig, Steve and I are saying, actually, work's going on the ground. I think Friends of Fleckwenny got about $1.5 million into Zimbabwe over its life, for example. And I personally would like to see that continue. Steve.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Reparations, it's a massive subject. I mean, and we do see every now and again in the news that, you know, that Lady so-and-so or Lord so-and-so or some company has recognised the harm done, apologises, and put their hands in their pockets and hand over some dosh. What we did in Rwanda, we did a survey of about 15 of our contacts, including some students, some of the volunteers, the Quaker leadership and what have you. And two themes came out. A, that they thought, yep, the colonial powers did a lot of harm, mainly in terms of destroying culture, setting one person against another person, divide and rule. I mean, it was mainly the Belgians and not the Brits, but of course the Brits did massive harm in other countries as well. But the other theme was, yeah, that's history. What we want now is to look forward. We want education, we want health. They're the main things they want going forward. And so they're looking at it in a positive way. What support is there out there to educate our youth? What support is there out there to stop young children dying of very curable diseases? So their spin, not their spin, wrong word, their view was, yeah, the harm's been done, but going forward, let's work together to sort out the key issues. And the problem with a load of money coming across, how on earth is that spent? You send a lot of money into Rwanda and the ministers all end up with bigger Toyotas.
Could I ask Patsy to circulate that paper to those of us who are here so that we can read it? I think that would be very helpful. And thank you for what you've said. It makes a great deal of sense to me because, you know, I think we've got a group in this area meeting. People are trying to research various Quakers from the past to find out their involvement in the slave trade. Well, it's not information that they actually kept because, you know, either you kept quiet about it or, you know, nobody was much interested. It was, you know, and Quakers weren't against the slave trade until, I mean, the 1750s, wasn't it, that they finally got round to it. But I do like the idea of just saying, well, you know, we don't know, but shall we, you know, put 10% or whatever of our assets, which in fact would be quite a, yeah, I think that's, and finding projects, you know, so that it is actually doing good on the ground. I can remember years ago reading a book, is it the Peace Corps in America? You know, somebody going and, you know, teaching somebody to, you know, do something so he made more money that year. But in fact, he used the money and went out and bought himself a fancy belt. which I think is quite understandable because that would have attracted, people of the opposite sex, which I think was what this young man wanted, but it wasn't what the Americans, wanted him to plough the money back in. So one can understand people, if they get hold of the money, buying themselves nice homes, and they, but as you say, I think it basically needs more involvement in projects overseas, isn't it? And hoping that most of them do turn out to be mainly positive, rather. Because you can be too hesitant sometimes, just worried that you're going to do harm if
I think if it's a partnership approach, especially working with Quakers or people that you know and trust, then can I think of anything that's been harmful? I'm not sure. I can think of one or two projects that didn't go overly well.
Yeah.
Mushroom growing, for example. But there we are. One takes risks. But just to say on the general question of reparations, there is a strong link to the loss and damage agenda. And if one takes reparations in terms of repair and moving forward, and then it makes more sense to me rather than going into the mechanics of it. It is one of the themes of the Friends World Committee for Consultations World Plenary event next summer in Southern Africa. And we should remember that there are a huge number of Quakers in Africa, particularly in the Great Lakes area, where it's more programmed. In Southern Africa, it tends to be liberal, unprogrammed, more akin to Britain Yearly Meeting. But we have, as Steve has said, terrific colleagues to work with there.
There is something of an argument, the 10% or whatever, in getting rid of the debt, because the debt, and again, our survey, quite a few folk came back with the injustice of ongoing debt. And, governments in the past have tried to get some sort of uniform approach to debt alleviation. It always seems to fall over. It doesn't seem to happen. So that would be a damn good start. But I'm just nervous about shipping, boatloads of dollars across to governments who you don't quite know what's going to happen.
I think the government should be dealing with the debt, because I think if we sent the money to pay off the debts, it's just going back into the Western banks, who are probably the people who are resisting, the call to write them off. Although they probably have written them off in their accounts so they can get the tax relief on it. But still want the money. Yeah. Right. I'll shut up and go away. I think that would be good.
that shows your accounting background.
Yeah.
Christopher.
Oh. Well, it is worth bearing in mind sometimes.
It is, my friend. Yes. Have we any more questions and comments, folks?
Do have a look at the Quaker Africa Interest Group website. And I'm sure both Steve and I would like to say that there are a whole heap of other projects and charities working on the ground, many of which you probably know about: Quaker Congo Partnership, Money for Madagascar, Great Lakes Peace Initiative, and so on.
Yes, because Marion Liebman of our area meeting has been involved in peace work, I think, in the Great Lakes, hasn't she?
Very much so. I mean, she's done some hugely valuable work on trauma reconciliation in particular. And Steve and I, via Patsy, if anybody wants to continue the conversation, would be Steve. I'm looking at you here. We'd be very happy to do so.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you,
I
folks.
can talk. I can talk all day on on projects.
Yeah, thank you, folks, for coming. It has been a interesting
Mm.
and passionate time we have spent together, and I think, I don't know if I speak for Patsy, but I am gratified that we have developed this and will continue to go on with it, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah, that's
Okay.
certainly the plan anyway. Thank you.
Okay, well, before you all depart for your lunch, let me tell you of what we've got next week. Next week we have Don Cameron of the Mr. Balloon fan, you know, the man who does all those big ballooning type things. But he's not coming to talk about balloons. He's coming to speak on perspectives of humanism.
Oh,
Yeah, should be very different. As I always say before, you know, tell your friends, tell your meeting to come and join us. It's an interesting morning's time.
And please make sure that they know that they can go to the link and they can then look up this talk and all the other talks that we've had, going back for, I think it's 3 years now. So
Yeah.
a treat in store for some people.
Okay.
Okay.
And we hope you enjoy your afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
thank you.